Ask our interpreters to explain how to access interpretation. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish logo in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Buenos días. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish Español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo.
Thank you. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples, who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay Digueño, the Luiseño, the Cupeño, and the Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Michael, can you please confirm quorum?
We have a quorum, Chair.
Alrighty, let's go ahead with non-agenda public comment. How many do we have?
If you're online, please raise your hand now. We have 1 in person, followed by 4 online.
Thank you.
First, it'd be Truth, followed by Andrea Ebbing online. Just a quick note, for the purposes of civility and orderly meeting, we kindly ask that you refrain from using loud, threatening, profane, or abusive language. Per our board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. So based on those factors, the chair has determined that for today's meeting, each member of the public will be allowed 2 minutes for their comments. Also, as a reminder, committee, we do not use the voting pads. So just go ahead and raise your hands if and when you'd like to speak. Let's go ahead and go with Truth, followed by Andrea Ebbing.
All right, I have some transit YOP math. 6.5 million in 2026, 13.5 million in 2025, 9 million in 2024, which equals over $29 million blown in 3 years. Where's SANDAG's data to prove that these unaccompanied children are using transit once they get a car? Because that was the original excuse for the program. Then the newer excuse was to replace school buses with transit because this board lies as often as the drug addicts riding transit for free. Here's 2 examples of YOP in action. On a trolley, I witnessed a liquor bottle carrying man exchange a cigarette for an unknown drug from a man with a pill bottle. That's what children can experience for free, but at what cost to their well-being? The taxpayer-funded multi-million-dollar YOP program is the equivalent of child endangerment. Another example, on a bus, all the school children entered, packing the bus for us paying riders. Some brats on the taxpayer's dime said, quote, "You can tell it's a kid, let him on. It's not like it gets taken out of your paycheck," end quote. SANDAG is contributing to an uneducated, indoctrinated, ungrateful, toxic socialist upbringing of San Diego County's children, and it is disgusting. And that's why MTS really wants to jack up the fares. Now I've decided I'm gonna change the rest of my speech, and we're gonna uplift it from that toxic place. So let's talk about my morning, which began very early, and I was hanging out, and we'll just say Old Town. And I heard a woman who was very educated on the local affairs. She was talking government. Of course, I perked my ears up, and I won't say what group she's involved with, but she's very involved in Old Town, and she was recruiting another woman to become part of it. And I just was enjoying every second of it while I ate a pastry. And she said, planning is our voice. It's just, wonderful. And then I had another good what would you call it, witnessing of an incident. I was walking past a trolley and a guy was playing a video on his phone talking about the Council on Foreign Relations. It's like, wow, I feel like things are getting better. There's definitely younger people getting educated. Dang, if we don't need more of that. So thank you.
Next is Andrea Ebbing online, followed by Marco Espinoza.
Hi, this is Andrea Ebbing, and I'm asking you guys as leaders to stand up to the filthy animal in our district attorney's office named Summer Steffen. Guys, she's killing people, okay? She's allowing police officers to murder people in public. It's time to take a stand against what you know is going on, which is an absolute and total injustice of San Diego. The Amy Knox harm reduction case, she was the whistleblower. Summer Steffen's friend Tara is a meth head who was overdosing on drugs that she was supposed to be testing for drug addicts. The last I knew, we had a major narcotics unit. Why in the Christ are we testing drugs for fentanyl? You come in with meth and heroin, you get arrested. But not in San Diego, when you have a dope dealing pig for a district attorney who sells children and body brokers and makes all of this fearful. Stand up to her. Stand up to that freaking animal. I called purchasing with the county, and I spoke to Sean, who I let know that money, that millions of dollars, now we have to pay $150,000 to these so-called vendors who are going to teach people how to use Narcan. Holy shit, what a cesspool. This is unbelievable. Get her out. Anybody who's an attorney, take over and become district attorney. The issues we have come from having a filthy child rapist pig in that office. Get her out. Get the animal out of the office. An attorney, please step in and reform San Diego. The issues we have stem from that pig's office. Her and her federal judge husband, who had to step down 4 years early because of what they're doing, because they're filthy freaking animals. That's why her daughter is a porn star. That's not a joke. That's true. Look it up on Google. Stephanie Sabrow is an adult film star. Google images.
Next is Marco Espinoza, followed by the original draw.
Hello, can you hear me testing?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Marco Espinoza. Happy Friday to you all. I just wanted to say that I know that plans have changed for SANDAG in terms of, let's say, like the purple line. I know that was an idea at one point, and it's a bit faded away since grants and funding has been changed and whatnot. And something I saw in the news with Vice Chair Council President Luqadda and Chair Huebner, where Vice Chair was mentioning how the voters didn't have the appetite for a tax increase, and then Chair Huebner in the news article, same news article, mentioned that instead of perhaps putting money towards the purple line, that instead it'll go perhaps towards like electric buses. And I'm really, really big in support of that. I mean, I use MTS every day. I have the monthly pass on auto renew, and I intend to have that forever, whether I get a car or not. Very much happy to put money towards the MTS system. I just want to really advocate for those electric buses. Compared to the traditional buses, which can be really loud and, to use the phrase, sometimes a rickety barge. They just make all these little noises and whatnot. And for user experience, those electric buses are really, really nice. So I do appreciate those. And for your guys' hard work. Thank you very much, and have a nice weekend.
Next is the original draw, followed by Paul the Bold.
I find it so interesting that you guys are concerned about people staying on topic, using correct language, right? Not foul language, and, things like that. When there are significant atrocities happening around us. Like, you guys even like to support someone like Scott Wiener, who's a pedophile. And then you don't want me to talk about man who rapes children and things like that. But you guys don't mind supporting him. And you don't mind like engaging in all of these nefarious things that are leading people into dire straits. And we have a huge human and child trafficking problem. And the way that you guys allow children to ride on the bus for free is incentivizing that for predators. And it's like you're more concerned about like stay on topic, don't use that language. It's like we should all be up in arms and fucking pissed off about what's going on. Like all of you guys should be. You shouldn't be sitting there like on your phone looking, what am I gonna look for? Like, some hockey or something. It's very sad. It's very sad to see that people who have been entrusted with the authority to, make people's lives better, actually inverted it and are destroying people's lives. And you don't give a shit. Because you care more about the minutia and the stupid staying on topic than really talking about the things that have led us to where we're at, the things that we must talk about. And this is why society is crumbling, is because everybody wants to tiptoe on eggshells and be like, oh, I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Well, it's time to hurt people's feelings. And if you're hurt by the truth, that's your own problem. And you need to do some inner work. But it's like, it's such a joke to even have these meetings when such atrocious things.
Thank you. Next is Paul the Bold, followed by phone number ending in, our last public comment, phone number ending in 1672.
So, any member non-agenda comments? Supervisor Curie?
Chair,
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said we were done.
No, the last public comment
Okay,
was
I'm jumping.
1672. Paul the Bold, go ahead, 2 minutes.
Good morning. SANDAG self-imposed virtue signaling. We can get it done early. Budget time is in a short week. Time's up, pens down, as they used to say on Jeopardy. In fact, it is only due June 30. So why the rush? The feds, state, and San Diego City and County are of huge debt burdens and deficits, and people are unlikely to trust you with your inflated projections, corruption, unimplemented audit recommendations 5 years old, lack of transparency and accountability and all. These are getting better, but you keep backsliding. Why do you expect people to give you all the funds and taxes you beg for? The revenue expectations I've seen are totally unrealistic. Major projects keep getting delayed. The Los Angeles bikeways, fixing freeways and all. Prices keep going up, especially gas prices. We now have the president's budget. Doesn't look too promising for transportation or just about anything else. The good news is that it's DOA, dead on arrival. However, it means a long period of waiting for budget adjustments and money to come in, if that's what you want, does come through. I'm really surprised you aren't discussing it today. You need to really revamp the draft budget and stop virtue signaling that all is well, because when it comes to moving all that special purpose funds you need, if there's a budget shortfall, money doesn't come on time.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our last public comment is phone number ending in 1672.
Okay, Consuelo here. Unbelievable, Lisa. Like you literally thought you heard something when you totally didn't, lady. Hope you got your coffee in. So rude. Anyways, okay, here we go. This message is for those of you who genuinely believe you're doing a good job. I don't doubt your intentions. I don't doubt that many of you came into this wanting to help people, but intention and impact are not the same thing. And the reality on the ground is speaking for itself. We are watching homelessness grow, addiction deepen, and mental health illness go unaddressed in every aspect, every way, especially people being selected to boards. Let's see. So I guess today, excuse me, I want to offer you something you may not hear often in rooms like this. You have permission to think outside the system you've been operating in. And because the truth is the system you're working within wasn't designed to truly uplift. If it was, we wouldn't be seeing these outcomes year after year. It's getting worse, and I don't know why y'all keep patting yourselves on the back. But I'm glad you have the few of us who chime in to pay attention to what's happening. And at some point, you have to ask, you know, you have to realize you're not solving any problems, you're literally managing them. And they're lucrative too, so I guess they'll never be resolved. Let's see what else. You know, I have written so many nice things, and I'm just not in the mood to say them. You know what I'm saying? Because y'all are...
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes our public comment on this item, Chair.
Okay, now we're at non-agenda member comments. Supervisor Aguirre.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good morning. And I wanted to just follow up on a request I had made during the retreat to agendize a letter, hopefully for consideration of this board, to request a state of emergency from our state government. And I'll share briefly why, because that question gets asked a lot, what that would do. Firstly, it would allow for a federal declaration of emergency related to the sewage crisis to take place, which would accelerate fixes on our side in addition to what's already in motion in the Mexican side. But I wanted to also share that we have reached a pretty grim threshold. Last time during the staff retreat, I did mention that we had very high levels of hydrogen sulfide. They're basically spikes, which are bad. But now we have been consistently exposed for long periods of time. One night we were exposed to almost 8 hours, consecutive hours of hydrogen sulfide levels of 500 parts per billion. And just to give you an idea, the baseline level for what is considered healthy is 30. And that alone is already quite high because nobody should be breathing in hydrogen sulfide at all, especially for long periods of time. So I ask that this item, even though it's semi-related to the work that we do here, it is one of the, if not the only agency that includes all 18 city agencies within San Diego County. And I think that the weight that it carries is quite impactful to have a unified voice to call for this declaration. And we can discuss more about the specifics of what that would entail, but I would love it if this board would consider agendizing it.
You normally bring it right to executive. Is that, should I ask our legal counsel if the process is, does it go straight to the board or to the executive and board, or is that up to us to decide?
That's a question. Amberlyn, do you want to just guide us through this one? That we're going to go, now just following the steps.
certainly. So I would reference your board policy for section 6, which states that if any member wants to request that an item be added to agenda, they're to make the request to the chair. And then the chair would work with staff to get that on a future agenda. As to whether it goes to the executive committee or the board, I believe that would be at the discretion of the chair, exercising her agenda setting authorities.
How about if it goes to the board directly?
Thank you, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
good,
I
good.
appreciate that.
Thank you. I look forward to the discussion because I would like to know, all the details of what it all entails and what that could possibly mean in terms of actually fixing this.
Yes, absolutely. I'd be happy to share that. Thank you.
Any further non-agenda? Mayor Jones.
Well, the irony of that is you've been asking that since you were mayor back, I think it was maybe 2 years ago. She had a press conference I attended. Literally, she was talking about it back then, and still the state has done nothing. I would be in favor of doing that too. So whatever the most quick way, 500 parts per billion and 30 is considered to be healthy I think that's pretty hard to believe that our state still has not done anything.
It's egregious, yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other? No. Alrighty. So we'll now move to consent. I'd like to highlight that on consent that item 3.2 has been deferred to the May 8th Board of Directors meeting agenda. So Michael, any public comments on consent?
We do. If you want to comment on consent, please raise your hand now. We have one in person. So we'll open public comment on consent. Please limit your comments to the items on the consent agenda only. If comments are not related to the consent agenda, you will be asked to stay on topic. If you do not stay on topic, you will be muted. So there's one item on consent, that's approval of the meeting minutes. We have truth, followed by the original draw online.
So nobody wants me to say anything about the fact that New Scum doesn't care what you guys do. Okay, I won't. Item 3.1. The minutes cannot possibly relay that only 2 people were actually on time to the last executive committee, which was Minto and Bill Wells. East County early is a real trait, and it is the only way to properly conduct business. Unlike Minto today, who was likely busy eating his breakfast cookies, and so was not 30 minutes early, was maybe 15 minutes early, maybe less than that, 10 minutes, 9 minutes. I also noticed that Rebecca Jones was 30 seconds late. That's horrible for her. She's actually always on time. But who was not on time? This needs to be in the next minutes. Carolina, always late. Always. She was 10 minutes late. I checked the clock. So unlike these people, I have learned very well that you should always arrive 30 minutes early to be on time. And I believe this was also the meeting where I was able to plan fun after. So I'm hoping you guys will not talk a lot again so that I can repeat that. But I am going to talk about the withdrawal of item 3.2. Because I was looking for the draft agendas, wasn't posted by Wednesday night, less than 48 hours before the meeting, and then it was canceled by yesterday night when I looked again. And I'm concerned that SANDAG is not following state law. Mario can't keep taking responsibility for other people's intentional flubs at this agency. And I really don't understand why you're having difficulty formulating agendas. It sounded like you still had a problem. You didn't know the basic procedure of how to get something on an agenda. It's a little concerning as a member of the public who knows how meetings work pretty well, a little concerned. But since these items were stricken, I'm hoping that means these meetings are never going to happen. That'll make me really happy. Thank you.
Next is the original draw online, followed by Paul the Bold.
Yeah, Newsom ain't gonna do anything, and you guys know it. Anyway, yeah, it's your internal controls that you were speaking about at the last meeting. All of these boards and commissions, they all have this in the city and the county, pretending to have some kind of, control over the spending and make sure there's no fraud, waste, and abuse happening, when in reality, it actually covers it up and makes sure it doesn't come out, because you guys wrap everything up under the guise of you're following a policy or you're doing this or that, when exactly what you're doing is an inversion of what you tell people that you're doing. And you guys engage with entities and get into contracts with people who, just cost us more and more and more and more money. And, it leads you to believe, like, what kind of kickbacks would you guys get from those entities to continue those contracts when, even getting into contracts with people like the audit committee are with this ERP that you guys did. it has 18 federal lawsuits. And they're like, it's crazy that even like just, there's data breaches and things like that. And again, it doesn't matter when you have an entity that you're contracting with that is, their investors are BlackRock and Vanguard, that information gets shared internally. So where's the internal control for that? I mean, it's just like, it's a bunch of nonsense how you guys can actually sit there and be proud of yourselves, like Consuelo was saying, when like the Tijuana River Valley has been decades long issues. You don't have any intention on fixing it. You want to collect data on the people to see what it does. Why do you need that? You have decades of medical records from these people that would tell you exactly what it's done to them. So it's so ridiculous the way you guys, sit here and act like you're doing a great job.
Next is Paula Bald, followed by Consuelo. This is a consent agenda.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Here comes the list of names like the Oscars and who did what on the consent agenda, which was consented to. Surprise! It would be nice to know what the public speakers and board members actually discussed without having to find it on the video. But if you need the video, maybe you can put a time a particular item was discussed on the video into the minutes. Save us a bit of time if we need to scan the video. Or what the speakers are wearing so we can ID them faster, and it will remind us of the Oscars, by the way. But most of us can read a brief or pithy description a lot faster, and it's usually easier to understand too if the speaker has an accent or speaks too fast. Is SANDAG so understaffed that it can't provide proper minutes? Last meeting of this committee went very smoothly. Presentations were interesting, especially to see Mrs. Pinckney Forrest take all those notes. Glad that now includes a link to the video in the minutes, which saves a few seconds finding it on the calendar. As for the review of draft board agendas, I hope it gets here soon, but there are so many items which repeat regularly and so many items that you kind of can guess what's coming. I mean, whoever puts these things together must have absolutely no imagination whatsoever. I don't know what's going on, but it's crazy. I like a
Thank
preview
you. Your
of
time
coming
has expired.
attractions.
Our last public comment is Consuelo. Consuelo, you're self-muted.
Okay, so let's see. Yeah, just regarding how y'all are not stating what the people spoke on, the concerned citizen. That's egregious. Now that is egregious. Using the term egregious for the TJ River, Lisa. Yeah, it's already been exposed that people are getting kickbacks for that sewage issue. And unfortunately, the public is not aware, nor, honestly, if they did find out, they wouldn't really do shit about it because they don't do shit about anything they do find out, like some of the Epstein files. Anyways, so either y'all are in denial or entirely clueless and have no business being paid for serving the public, but you don't serve them. You actually continue to deceive. And yep, Paloma, you're just another Nora Vargas, honestly. So gross. Happy Friday. I'm done.
That concludes our public comment on consent agenda, Chair.
Thanks so much. Any member comments on consent? I see none. May I have a motion to approve consent, please? Moved by Minto, second by Chavez. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, that passes unanimously. And we'll now move on to our next item, which is the legislative status report. Ryan.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Before I get into the legislative updates, I wanted to start with the ask in front of you today. Staff is recommending a support position on Assembly Bill 2002 by Assemblymember Salache. AB 2002 would codify the successful Regional Early Action Planning Program, or REAP, as more affectionately known, into an ongoing framework to give regional agencies like ours continuing resources to support member jurisdictions through the housing element process and RENA implementation. The original REAP program in 2019 was a one-time $125 million investment that allowed SANDAG and others to deliver support to member jurisdictions during the sixth RENA cycle. SANDAG received $6.8 million in REAP 1.0 funding to develop our Housing Acceleration Program to help member jurisdictions with housing element compliance. Making REAP permanent would provide critical ongoing capacity for regional housing planning support as the state moves into the seventh RENA cycle. SCAG is sponsoring this bill alongside a complimentary $125 million one-time budget request for the seventh cycle implementation in specific. It is important to note that AB 2002 itself does not fund the REAP program in an ongoing manner. The bill relies on future currently unspecified general fund appropriations. Staff recommends a support position for this bill, which is in alignment with the legislative program goals 6 and 10 around regional planning flexibility and housing development approaches. And I wanted to give opportunity for pause there for any questions or clarifications around the bill in specific before I get into the legislative updates.
Thank you. Any questions? I see none. Thank you.
Okay. Great. So on to legislative update. I wanted to walk through some quick updates on state bills that the agency has taken position on throughout the year, and then close on the federal landscape. So on the state side, Senate Bill 1087, our co-sponsored SB 375 reform bill to update regional planning requirements, continues to advance through the Senate. Antoinette and Mario both testified in support of the bill at policy hearings in April, and the bill successfully cleared both of the policy committees in the Senate that it was heard in. It's now pending a hearing in Senate Appropriations expected for May 4th. We're also tracking two housing-related measures the board took positions on that also had recent action. AB 2296 from Assemblymember Papan, which would make targeted improvements to the RENA process. This is the bill that adjusted timelines for housing element preparation and compliance. It has now passed through two policy committees and is also pending hearing in Assembly Appropriations. The last bill I wanted to update on is AB 2576, which the committee took a position on the last executive committee meeting, which relates to implementation of SB 79. That bill also advanced out of policy committees, but was substantially amended in the process. Notably, for our purposes and interests, the one-year delay to SB 79 that was included in the bill and that SANDAG had supported was removed. The bill is now more narrowly focused on historic resource protections tied to recently designated sites, and it is continuing to move through the Assembly in that narrower form. So, more broadly, with state deadlines approaching, May 15th is the deadline for fiscal committee passage in House of Origin, and then May 29th is the deadline for bills to pass out of the House of Origin. And the pace of Sacramento is expected to pick up in the coming weeks as a result of those May deadlines. With that context, I'll turn to the federal update. SANDAG's board and executive leadership was in Washington this week with the chamber delegation, meeting with our congressional delegation and federal agency partners to reinforce priorities, including Losan, Otay Mesa East, the Tijuana River Valley, and surface transportation reauthorization. Wanted to give an opportunity for Mario or Vice Chair LaCava if they had anything to add about the trip, as they both participated.
You got boy put me on the spot. I think this year, to be blunt, I think the chamber had a harder time setting up meetings in the past, and I know there were a lot of independent meetings that were set up. I think we got very blunt responses by staff, good, hardworking people, but telling us what the administration's line is. and for actually a little bit of joy to people who call in to SANDAG. The Secretary of Transportation made it very clear they are not interested in bike lanes or dedicated bus lanes. They want to move people in their cars faster. And so it gave a pretty clear signal that if and when SANDAG submits applications, do not include bike lanes and dedicated bus lanes. I'm being rather blunt, but that's the lay of the land with this current administration, even to the point of removing bike lanes that seem to serve the city of Washington, D.C. very well. I will add on a hopeful note, the response we get to all the folks we reached out to in terms of the Tijuana River Valley was very positive, very upbeat. Some 300 million is in the president's budget for this. I don't begin to understand the complexity of it as Supervisor Aguirre does, but it was very hopeful and everybody was very supportive. That was the one thing that bound us all together in terms of the most important issue in our region. We also heard very positive response to what we're doing here in the region. They know about us. They appreciate the things that we're doing in so many levels. So I was encouraged by that feedback. And want to give a shout out to Hannah for the support that she provided in these conversations. And I'll close there and turn it over to Mario.
Thank you. Probably the only thing to add is we're in a period where the new surface transportation bill is being discussed. The transportation bill is expiring at the end of the year, as we know it. And so there's a lot of discussions going on, a lot of committee meetings. So we were able to engage with congressional members. Actually, we had a breakfast with the congressman from the Central Valley. And he is, I can't remember his name.
Vince Vaughn.
Funk. Yeah. And he is in the middle of those conversations of what the transportation will look like. So passing on the priorities together to our congressional members and the two senators for the state that we were able to chat with, passing on those priorities that the region has as it relates to the surface transportation bill was very important. You know, many highlights, but I think one of the asks among several was the Lausanne corridor is not treated like the northeastern corridor in the country. That one receives a substantial amount of funding directly from the federal government for operations, and yet the Lausanne corridor does not. That one probably accounts for, give or take, 40% of the ridership in the United States. Our Lausanne corridor probably accounts for 17%, give or take. But it's a very important piece of the transportation element. We had other discussions related to resiliency, to the border, to also more formula funds overall for the regions coming directly to the region, so it could be implemented based on what boards like this one or committees like this one will think are the priorities locally. So it is very important the period that we are as it relates to transportation and our continuous engagement in Washington. It's going to be key of figuring out or putting San Diego even in a higher level in the map. Like Vice Chair said, you know, they acknowledge us, but you know, the more that we bring up our best practices and our needs, it's important.
Great. Thank you both. So in other Washington news, Congress this week passed a full year DHS appropriations bill that ended a 76-day partial shutdown that affected Coast Guard, TSA, and other components. President Trump signed the bill yesterday as well. It's important to note that the bill funds most of DHS for the remainder of the fiscal year, but does not include funding for ICE and Customs and Border Protection. Congressional Republicans are planning to fund those agencies through a multi-year budget reconciliation bill, which can be enacted in the Senate on a party line vote with 51 votes rather than the 60 needed to overcome a filibuster. The reason for this update, while it's not directly related to transportation, is that the reconciliation effort will consume significant attention and Senate floor time and will affect the schedule for everything else, including surface transportation reauthorization. So as a reminder, the current surface transportation bill that Mario spoke to, IIJA, expires September 30th of this year. The House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee has delayed its long anticipated markup of the bill several times, and the most recent and current tentative hearing date for that markup is May 13th. Given the Senate is not yet on a markup schedule, we're hearing more and more members and staff openly discussing the likelihood of a short-term extension being needed for that bill so as to not have that funding lapse. We'll continue tracking that closely. Lastly, the FY27 appropriations process is now in full swing. The President's budget for the year was released April 3rd. Under the proposed budget, DOT overall, Department of Transportation, would see a 1.6% increase in appropriated funds. But that headline does cover up a fact that there's a much more difficult picture painted for transit and rail. There are significant cuts proposed in that President's budget, including a $483 million cut to the FTA Capital Investment Grants Program and a zeroing out of the federal-state partnership for intercity passenger rail. And that last one is significant, again, for what Mario's speaking to in terms of low sand projects and the funding that we use for some of those. It's important to note here, the President's budget is just a starting gun for the appropriations process, and that ultimate budget bills will be developed in Congress as they are the holders of the power of the purse. To close, staff is actively engaged across all of these state and federal fronts, working with our advocates in Sacramento and DC, coordinating with our delegations and all of your jurisdictions to continue advancing our regional priorities. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. Sunset, Mario.
I think one point, the strategic point is if there is a continuation of the surface transportation bill in September, and it has to happen because if not, a lot of transportation funding stops, similar to Homeland Security. It stops on their side, also on the transportation side. But most probably the final new surface transportation bill would happen in the next Congress. So because of the change, am I saying something correctly?
No, yeah, that's accurate. That's a big component.
So that's where the strategics happen also.
Got it. Okay. Question?
I don't know if it makes sense, but you know, I've brought this up a few times to at least my state senator and definitely my assembly member too. We really need redevelopment back the way that it was. I don't know if that's something that we should agendize. I mean, if it was back the way that it was previously, a lot of, and San Marcos, just as a side note, we were, I would say we were in the top 10 largest redevelopment agencies in the state, which is why, you know, I talk about all the affordable housing we have in San Marcos. It's because we had redevelopment. And if there's a way to start talking about that again, you know, in 2012, when they eliminated the redevelopment agencies, it really did make it tougher for us because there's just no way to fund it. If they're going to give us a mandate, they need to bring back redevelopment agencies because I think many of us, and there were a few obviously that did, you know, the wrong thing, but it was really not as many that actually, I mean, so many more did good with the money than, you know, were bad actors. They should have been strategic, gone after the bad actors. I know San Diego would have benefited from it as well because they also had a very big agency. So anyway, if we can maybe start talking about that.
Every time I go up, I mention it. Believe me, we had just point of interest, Solana Beach had just started our redevelopment agency and we had so much promise. We would have really earned quite a bit of money that we could have put toward affordable housing.
For sure.
Just as we had started, we had to roll it all back, which was very frustrating. So the last few times we've been in Sacramento, I have mentioned it every time, with some other ideas as well. I mean, not just exactly as it was, but perhaps we're a little teeny bit off topic, but I'll just go real fast, Amberlyn and Teddy and Alfred. But just take a look at maybe what we do is just give a flat percentage of increase of taxes to the cities, property tax to the cities on the items, the properties we put into our housing element. I mean, maybe something as simple as that, like But of course, they don't want to give up the tax. And I know Alvarez had some discussions and thoughts about doing some redevelopment redos, but we really do have to push that. And it would be nice if we maybe could have an item on various ideas, like what redevelopment was. I've heard various responses as to where all the money went. I thought some
Well,
of
we
it
had to give a lot of money back.
No, I
wanted
when we had redevelopment
Oh,
agency, right? And so like who was helped and who was harmed, if somebody was harmed. And, you know, maybe let's have a creative discussion about how we can approach this and maybe lead the way on it in Sacramento.
We can have the regional, our planning committee start that discussion and bubbling it up here to exec and then to, if it needs something to the board, but we can have
Yeah.
our regional planning committee work on it.
That's a good place for it. And we
Yeah,
can-
definitely. And, you know, I mean, just the infrastructure in those areas of the redevelopment areas was a big deal because you could actually, I mean, we actually had a grant fund, I believe, and then we used some redevelopment money. In one of our lower income areas, we were able to put a rail crossing,
Nice.
which, you know, pedestrian rail crossing is very important for those areas where people were already jumping across just because it was easier. They didn't want to, you know, it was pretty far to go out of the way. So to be able to add things like that are really important to those parts of our community where, you know, people can have that pedestrian access. So anything we want to do, I think we need to really start getting serious about that. And I appreciate you doing that, Chair Habener.
Sure, very good. Yes, Mayor Minto.
Yeah, just as a report, this is probably perfect timing. And the reason for that is because last week up at Cal Cities, at their Legislative Action Day, they actually had quite a bit of discussion around this.
Huh?
And what was very interesting is we had several candidates for governor there. And boy, I'll tell you what, they put the pins to them about RDA and trying to, because bottom line is, if you can get the governor on or whoever the potential governor is, you may be able to make some headway. And some of them actually knew what it was. Others, they answered that led you to believe they had no clue what it was, which is very typical. So this is probably very good timing on this.
And I know at Cal Cities that Bill Higgins, and then Bill Fulton wrote an article that was published in Cal Matters about an idea too of how to revamp the RDAs.
Right.
First Vice Chair LaCava.
A couple of things. One, to the current conversation, I'd be curious to include in that conversation enhanced infrastructure financing districts, EIFD, which was kind of a little bit of an attempt to bring back a little bit of redevelopment, and whether that's working, because I know it's a very onerous process to actually set one of those up, but I think that might be a helpful part of that conversation. And then to the item, Ryan, I know you asked for questions earlier and I kind of didn't click in my brain. Just because I think we're all sensitive to unfunded mandates. I was just wondering if AB 2002 actually gets passed and codifies, but the funding doesn't come with it. Does that create an unfunded mandate that requires SANDAG to be doing something different than it does now without the funding to actually, the funding to go along with that? Is there a risk there?
It's a good question. My instinct is that it does not, but it's something I can confirm and come back on. I think the unfunded mandate to some extent would be on the state for sort of building out the administrative function for this program, and then, you know, if there's not funding for a program to administer, then there's that consideration for the state. But I can get back on.
Okay.
On the.
But I think for now, I'd be happy to move the staff recommendation.
Oh, okay. We have to go to public comments. And but I'll hold that.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, I also have a question.
Okay. Yes, Mayor, Supervisor.
Well, I have a couple questions.
Okay, go
Is
right
that
ahead.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that I'd be very interested in having a conversation around regional financing districts and redevelopment agencies. I think that's appropriate. And then regarding the appropriations funding for the Surface Transportation Act, if it's delayed to the new Congress, would the appropriations as well, or would it be part of the continuing resolution?
So the Surface Transportation Bill authorizes the programs,
Yep.
and then the annual appropriations bill would or would not fund those. So
But would the funding be delayed if
there are a lot of permutations for how it could work out based on whether there was an extension, if there was a lapse, and then sort of how the appropriations discussion would develop out of that. But they are more or less operating on sort of the existing authorization. And so it would more than likely continue sort of as it has been through the 5 years of IIJA, with the understanding that there's advance appropriations that were applied in the last authorization bill that obviously, if they're not intentionally put into legislation, would not come to recipients.
so it's precarious, I guess it sounds like, and if it doesn't get approved this cycle.
So, Supervisor, what has happened in other periods is Congress extends, let's call it the formula funds, and the grants that have not been obligated, they move forward because that money was already set aside, but they probably don't move with filling the bucket on those big programs like grant programs. They just want to continue the government moving, right? So that we do receive all the local agencies, the states receive formula funds through DOT. So that would continue. And normally those big pieces like a big grant program or whatever will probably not be funded. It would be only continuing what was already allocated in the formula funds, even to keep, I am not sure here, but even to keep the air traffic controllers moving because they get paid out of the DOT bill. So there's so many components that people don't really understand that the Amtrak services, a lot of those things, right? In the normal formula funds, and just keep the agencies operating.
Yeah, that's very helpful. That paints a better picture of what to expect. And then, so I have a couple questions, but relating to the state. I'm interested in seeing if there has been any movement on the Reconnecting Southeast San Diego and National City projects that I know that Senator Steve Padilla has been advocating to restore funding. And my understanding is our lobbyists went to testify in support of that. Do you have any updates on that? Because that's an important project for constituents in my district.
Not from a budgetary perspective, except for the fact that we did have Kirk Blackburn, our representative in Sacramento, attend a budget hearing and advocate on behalf of restoration of that funding, but haven't heard any developments in terms of the likelihood of that ultimately being included in the budget.
Okay.
The governor cut from the budget, so we're making the point to reinstitute.
Yes.
We'll see how the May revise comes out.
Okay.
But we are making the point, right, that raising our voice. At the end, it's going to be the governor's office and the Department of Finance if they plug it in or not. Again.
Sure. No, I fully understand that. I just want to make sure that, we're pushing as much as we can. And then a second question that I have is more to do with, a potential of something we could focus on, but it has to do with Cal and Screen, and we know that 5.0 is coming. And during our budget discussion, there were a few of us who brought up the need to potentially do a climate equity study. So probably not this legislative session, but maybe in a future one, we could pursue discussions with our representatives to see if that's something that they could be or help lead or carry a bill of that nature from state funding. There's a lot of climate resiliency funding in the state right now. Prop 4 funding is bringing billions of dollars to our state, and that those are going to be released later this year. Thanks to a lot of advocacy that we've worked on to make sure that those monies come faster than they were slated to come. So I think that could be an opportunity.
For sure. And I think in the future, we can bring an update on all the resiliency studies that we're doing here also, in addition to what you're bringing up.
That would be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Mayor Jones.
Sorry, I have one last question. Do we have any idea when we're going to get the SB 79 maps completed? I know maybe a few weeks.
We are targeting the first week of June, and our endeavor, there's been conflicting information. Let's put it in those words that have come up. So the agency will most probably put out a draft map with the disclaimers where we think there may be discrepancies between a informative document that the housing department put out versus what the law says. Our legal team has been evaluating, and the agency will take the most prudent point of grabbing what's on the law and interpreting it versus what's the informational document that was put out. And then that's where we're going to put in our interpretation. Our biggest issue is with the stacking of services. And we have a question of how the HCD informational document was interpret that. I don't know, Antoinette, if you want to add anything to that. But it's the first or second week of June that's going to be coming out.
No, I think you covered it, Mario. But I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
It's such a moving piece, Mayor Jones, that even SCAC is thinking of putting out an interactive map of what they seem to understand with what some of the HCD's interpretations are, that they just probably are going to go with something that is interactive that shows both. In our case, we're just going to interpret what we feel comfortable with.
So, in San Marcos, we have 4 stops for the Sprinter, and, we're preliminary getting a number of an additional 90,000 units when I only have 35,000 units in my city right now. So I literally almost fell off my chair when they were giving me my early numbers. So for cities like mine, and I know Oceanside's looking at a pretty large number too. I think they have around 77,000 housing units now, and they're talking about potentially 100 to 150,000. These numbers are absolutely ridiculous, and we really need to continue having these discussions with our legislators because I think the unintended consequences, it sounds great. Legislation does not build more housing. And first of all, we don't want it. I mean, I know I don't want it. I don't want that. And I know my residents will literally go crazy over things like this. They already feel, the squeeze on any density because, we are a city that developers want to invest in because we've got a lot of students and all of that, and another hospital coming. I can't even imagine what 90,000 more units would look like in my city. And then quick question for Ryan. The high fire severity mapping, that still is included, that you can take an action as a city to, maybe Stacy is kind of nodding her head. Maybe you want to address this. I'm hoping that's still part of it because that's, a big part of my city.
High fire severity, sea rise, there's a walking path exemption as well, and historic district. We're actually working with your city through our TA program to work on the ordinance. And we're also doing a model ordinance that all the jurisdictions can use and are providing one-on-one support to anybody who wants to pass an ordinance or do a local TOD plan.
And we might bring that up at our next meeting because I'm not sure if all of the cities realize that. Not too many cities were even talking about it.
So we recently, last month, had our first roundtable with all of the impacted cities. So all the city staff was on and was able to sort of share best practices, sort of the challenges that they're running into. And we provided information on the technical resources that we can provide. So we are now working with, we've offered the support to all the cities. We're now currently working with about 6.
Okay. All right. Well, we're definitely going to be passing an ordinance as soon as we can quickly get it together.
We have a meeting with your staff next week.
Yeah, perfect. All right.
Mayor Jones, on the SB 79, I just wanted to highlight that we have offered city support for the alternate map development. So I'm not sure if San Marcos has already started with that.
Yeah. And we have another roundtable scheduled for next week. So all the cities are aware, and I believe all of them have RSVP'd, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, second one.
So that having that alternate map application for each city, the dates and all that timetables is probably important as a plan B.
Yeah, because we need to work together, but we need our legislators to, when we sat down with Assembly Member Patel, I felt like she was listening, and then she voted yes on it. And I'm thinking, well, I do want to reach out once we get that finalized map to know what our number is potentially, so that we can reach back out to our legislators. I just don't understand. Again, this is why we need local control. It's very frustrating.
Planning by circles, not the smartest thing I've ever heard of before.
Me too.
Okay. Yeah, Marietta.
Yeah, just one last thing before I forget. Regarding those, the question that Paloma had about mandates, I think just to kind of steer you in a little bit of a direction here, we need to make sure that, because we're not an actual government agency, so I think all of those mandates apply as far as requiring to pay us for mandates. Doesn't apply to us and only applies to counties, cities, and special districts. So that might be a place to start looking, because I've never heard of it applying to.
Are you referring to unfunded mandates?
Yeah.
Yeah, the concept of unfunded mandates. I think Amberlyn looked into that a
we
lot.
talked about that, checking into whether or not we're affected by the unfunded. And I think they can do anything they want to us without paying for it.
If we're talking about AB 2002, I think it is a grant program. So, I didn't want to declaratively, say that there's nothing involving the existence of our HAP program, but it's pretty clearly not establishing any mandate.
And after public comment stuff, I'll say the rest of what I have to.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, let's now go to public comment. Michael?
Thank you, Chair. We have one in person and we have 3 online. First is Truth, followed by the original draw online. This is the legislative status report.
I had some revenue ideas today, but I decided not to say them. Newscom vetoed AB 2296 and arena housing quota reform because the state would have to pay for their own housing element dictates. So it seems to be an admission that Newscom blew the budget. SB 1087, the reform to SB 375, is likely not going to pass because anything that brings transparency to fraud and or stands in the way of the destruction of the state of California usually doesn't pass. Hence the Mexico First agenda and all sewage solutions not being paid for by Mexico ever, and no one ever suggesting that. And you got corrupt Cretan Blake Spears too scared to even answer questions on state fraud, had to throw in all power to the corrupt agency CARB with even more GHG reduction demands. So I'm going to say, in order to ensure SB 1087's fast, unread approval, I suggest renaming it to the Fight the Trump Agenda Bill. It'll definitely pass. But even worse than Blake's scum is pervert Scott Wiener. His bills, SB 79, and even worse, SB 677. And now his bait switch and forget SB 908 are not even close to his worst bills, because the worst ones are the ones that have directly resulted in the harm of women and children. Scott Wiener is yet another scum actively floating at the top of the Sacramento swamp, and you would think that the people that are on the Team Democrat would learn something from supporting their party, but they do not. It's almost like they don't experience their own policies. It's amazing. And just in general, it sounds like SANDAG as well as cities are in continuous damage control mode thanks to the state. So I don't know that it's worth the taxpaying residents of San Diego County funding all of these SANDAG trips to Sacramento, because there are no victories to show, and there's not going to be. You might be better off making social media videos in opposition to help educate regular people on where this evil junk is coming from. Unbiased Peter Pizer, not too many good thoughts about King Trump increasing war spending by 50%, with the EPA cut by 52%. Kind of proves that Mexico gets a free pass on everything while the American people die under every single president. And I do not support public transportation for the unconstitutional cesspool known as DC.
Next is the original draw online, followed by Paul DeBold.
Yeah, you
This is the
definitely
legislative
should
status
not.
report.
Yeah, you should not be supporting your Rape 1.0 program. That's what it is. You guys rape us with everything that you do. As you can tell, this isn't working for the people. You implement things that the people don't want, that they don't want to spend their money on, that it's putting them in danger. And you have people who are putting forward these bills that are pedophiles, that do put women, children, and anybody in danger. And the fact that we continue to allow this to happen and don't go, why are we supporting this? Why do we think that this person can bring forward anything that is going to be beneficial to people? I mean, seriously, you guys, there's an elephant in the room, and it's like, you guys care more about money. You care more about what money's going to come in than all the bills and who are actually putting them forward. You should be going to the state and saying, we're not going to support, Scott Wiener and his bills because he has sex with children and he encourages it. He's putting human trafficking is going on more, child trafficking, because of him and his bills. So this is why things perpetuate, is because you guys are too fucking afraid or too stupid or just too evil to not do anything. But you'll worry about going and getting the money. You won't worry about going, why don't we fight literally for what the people want in our community? You don't do that. You just go after wherever the money's at. And you won't say no to bills because you want that money to come in. And it's sad because the world is like it is because of your choices like this. And just again, you guys are compromised because you can't see the fucking forest through the trees when you support a man who rapes children. Shame on you, especially the ones of you who have fucking children.
Next is Paul the Bold, followed by Consuelo. This is a legislative status report.
Paul Bold. Hey, Ryan, looks like you hit the big time today and you're no longer buried in the consent calendar. Interesting that the Ellison Wilson State Legislative Report actually did not mention either AB 2002 or SALACHE, although it is recommended that you take a support position. So I'm wondering if you're being asked to vote on something you may not know about, and most of us are in the dark on. Government of blind leading the blind, perhaps? So I looked it up. Basically, it's money to do what you're already doing, the RHNA housing allocation. Sort of another way to increase the state's huge deficit by giving us our taxpayer dollars to support a program that isn't working right. And with all the vacant units left by the deportees and billionaires, I wonder how big a need there still is for RHNA. So please don't approve this scam. What you want is cheaper housing, 3D printed shipping crate, or even Adobe houses, which would keep up with the need for houses better than the multi-year projects which may not be needed by the time they're built. Most housing for those of truly low income, 30% AMI per HUD, would also help. And the president's budget doesn't look too promising for transportation or just about anything else. Of course, it's DOA dead on arrival. However, it means a long period of waiting for budget adjustments and money to come in if what you want does actually come through. Ooh.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our last public comment is Consuelo, and this is a legislative status report.
Okay, so Paloma, did you seriously ask, will it be delayed by a new Congress? Was that really your question? It's a state bill, Einstein. Stop delaying the meeting with your dumb questions. Oh my God, you might want to prepare like the rest of us do before the meeting. Okay. Federal visit. Okay, La Cava, you sound like you're just as happy as some of us are regarding that new, the news of the bike lanes. Okay, sounds like government's starting to listen to the taxpayers, huh? Not. It's just another way they're gauging the public and what they'll allow with the government to get away with. They literally will flush millions and billions down just to test the waters of resistance by the public, honestly. And it reminds me of, you know what it reminds me of? That movie, The Thomas Crown Affair, remember, where he's sailing? He's like this multi-million dollar, that high-speed, what's it called? The freaking catamaran. He crashes it. He crashes it only to see how big the splash would be. And that's exactly what happens with government when they have loads of our tax dollars blank checks to blow on crap just to test us all. It's so fucking sick. This system is sick. What's even more sick is the Stockholm Syndrome defenders and implementers of it. You all. Really sad. Wake up. Stop coming to these meetings with your dumb questions. Be prepared. You're getting paid for it. We're not. Done. Thank you.
That concludes our public
mic.
comment on this item, Chair.
Very good. Any more member comments? I see now we have a motion by First Vice Chair LaCava. Would you like to second the motion before your comments? Mayor
I can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, there may be just a couple of questions in here, but it's important for us all to remember that everything we're doing here is to make sure that every bit of our county is taken care of, even though we have to advocate somewhat for our individual communities, especially the smaller cities and, some of our rural areas. So staff, I want to thank you for having this today because it helps to bring forward some of the information that's coming out of Sacramento that maybe we don't always get. AB 202 is probably a pretty good bill to help us out. There's a lot of things that go on. Do we know what kind of, so here's a question. Have we looked at what funding SANDAG might realistically receive to, help with the measure moving forward? And how could those resources best support member agencies, particularly smaller cities with more limited staffing capability?
So I believe the way that the budget ask is written, it would be formula funded like REAP 1 was. So that gives us 8.4% of the pot. The original amount was also $125 million. HCD got an admin fee on that. I don't know if that's included in the next one. So 6.8 is what we got last time. I think if it was a full calculation of the 125, I think it brought us a little bit closer to 10.
Okay.
And just to note that funding ask is separate from the bill itself. Yeah. Just to.
Okay.
It was a budget request from the same author, but not part of the legislation.
And those mandates that we were talking about, do we know how those are going to affect smaller cities in East County, for instance, like Santee or maybe even Poway? I'm counting them in on this one.
Sure. Yeah. Just to reiterate this is funding available. There, the mandate would be what the funding is going to support us in the around RENA. This is funding to help with that process. So it's supportive of jurisdictions, but not a mandate on them.
Okay. And then I think you already answered my one question when you talked about the vote on the DHS or the funding and stuff, because I was curious about if it was going to slow down the whole process of getting things done. And the floor time that you specifically talked about, that was something I was very concerned about, because it doesn't matter how much we try and get done, if they're spending too much time on the garbage, in my opinion, then, that should have been taken care of early, then we're going to be suffering, with our fiscal responsibilities with transportation. Do we think that the federal funds are going to tighten up anymore?
Good crystal ball question. I think, as I noted, the overall funding suggested in the president's FY27 budget is slightly higher overall for Department of Transportation, but with deep cuts to certain parts of what they fund. I think that the anticipation is that Congress will push back on that, but the extent to which they're successful in sort of keeping things status quo is entirely up to the legislative process and those discussions and dialogue.
And Mayor,
so before you answer that, maybe you'll be able to answer this all in one. Could we possibly get maybe a list, or if you've been able to identify that, of what some of those deeper cuts might be, so that those can be things that we talk to our federal legislators about, trying to ring those back in? Okay,
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yes, so we can bring that up. And I think if crystal ball, one of the concerns I personally would have is, yeah, there may be more funding for, let's say, capital projects. And let's say on the highways and where we have needs all across, right? But it's also gonna, when we're doing projects in the state, it may be that there may be conflicting with funding that could be available to what we can achieve based on state mandates, right? The BMTs and all that. So it's going to be an interesting to maneuver both worlds, but we definitely can come with the requests you have of where we see some of the issues so you guys can go and talk to the different legislators.
Okay, well, since that's going to be really tight over the next several months, probably at least, maybe we can get more regular updates on exactly where it's at so that we know how we stand here. Because I think we have to be quite assertive and active in our approach to all of these funding mandates and lack of funding in the mandates.
I think by the time of our next executive committee meeting, we'll have seen some appropriations committee action in the House, definitely, and likely in the Senate. So we'll have a better sense of sort of where the three entities stand in terms of how they want to fund these programs. And we can sort of give you a round amount of information and sort of some expectations moving forward.
Great, thanks.
Supervisor Aguirre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, a clarifying point. The item 4 is a state and federal legislative activities that we'll be discussing or have discussed. I think there was some confusion in those that were on the phone. My question had to do with the U.S. Federal Congress, which is what we call the federal government on the legislative branch. The state branch, we refer to it as a legislature. People might not know that I actually worked in Congress, so. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other hands up, I will call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, that passes unanimously for support of AB 2002. So let's now move on to our next item, which is an enterprise resource planning update. We're going to go right to Mario first.
Yeah, this item, it's we heard you loud and clear. You wanted to see what we were doing when we have challenges. And this is a good example of one of the systems that we have had a journey to implement. When I came in, there were 2 new systems that had been or were in the process of acquisition. One was the back office system that we pivoted, and the ERP, the administrative system that we are was already being implemented, and the team has done an extraordinary job. And Shanae brought up also the other day the challenges and where we are with all the recommendations. ERP was somewhat presented some years ago as the solution to a lot of things, and it's not, but it is a good tool. But there's a lot of challenges to implement a complex system and then continue our other legacy systems. So this is a good snapshot of where we're going with SANDAG, what are the challenges that we're having. Then this could be applicable either to an administrative IT system, or it could be applicable to a process or our conversations with the transit agencies or other things. So I'm going to leave it to the team to do the presentation, but I think I'm very proud of what they've been accomplished, but also we want to showcase what they have accomplished, what the team is getting there, but also that there's still a heavy lift and a lot of challenges coming in. It's like keep driving the car with changing the tire as we're driving it. So take it away.
All right, thank you. So good morning. I am Shanae Pickney-Forrest, Director of Internal Controls. With me today are Jacob Elwood, the Director of Information Technology, Josh Golter, Director of Human Resources, and Kimberly Trammell, Director of Accounting and Finance. So the purpose of today's presentation is to provide an enterprise resource planning, also known as ERP, primer. We're presenting this to you because according to Board Policy 1, as the Executive Committee, you oversee the strategic governance of SANDAG as well as the corrective action plans resulting from audits and assessments. Our ERP system implementation that we will discuss today is an amalgamation of both. Since 2022 to the present, SANDAG has been implementing a new ERP system. The ERP and its supplemental systems impact operational areas such as accounting, budgeting, payroll, and contracts, which are under your purview as a committee. Additionally, during the same period, SANDAG has undergone a series of audits and assessments that have highlighted the need for better data, tracking, document management, and improved controls. So while we were implementing a new ERP system, we were simultaneously receiving audit recommendations that validated the need for the ERP improvements that we were and still are in progress implementing. And as we continue to move forward with the recommendation implementation and overall improvements, it is important that this committee understand its role in supporting governance, oversight, and decision-making as these efforts continue. Before we discuss our software platforms, I want to ground us in some core concepts so that we all have the same baseline understanding as we move through our discussion. As a reminder, SANDAG is responsible for 4 major types of activities. SANDAG plans transportation, land use, and housing projects for the community. It also builds and designs infrastructure projects. It preserves and manages sensitive habitat. And it provides resources like the Youth Opportunity Pass, 511, data dashboards, and grant funding. So within these 4 activities, there are a lot of moving parts. We have many departments that complete work in these areas, and the use of these systems help with managing these efforts. Speaking of agility, I think it's important to provide context on where SANDAG was and is within the organizational maturity model as it relates to our information systems processes. Prior to implementing the ERP system, SANDAG was at stage 1. This meant that the organization was operating, but not operating efficiently. There was more reliance on institutional knowledge. Data existed, but it was in silos or was difficult to access. And there was a heavy reliance on informal or manual processes. So for example, as part of our previous vendor payment process procedures, staff would receive an invoice from a vendor and manually route the invoice via paper or PDF for approval before the invoices were entered into the system. With the implementation of the ERP, we're moving from stage 1 maturity to stage 2. In stage 2, systems exist but are fragmented. However, data quality begins to improve and roles and responsibilities begin to align with established workflows. So for example, with our vendor payment process, staff receive an invoice and now, instead of routing manually, they enter the invoice into ERP. Supporting documentation is now housed in ERP, which addresses recommendations to provide supporting documentation in systems of records. And also approvals are routed through the system now, which is a control that ensures that checks are not cut unless proper approvals have occurred. The goal we're working towards is stage 3, where core systems become more integrated, data becomes more reliable, timely, and efficient to pull. So for our invoice example, we would then be able to start processing and assessing and evaluating our invoicing metrics and pull reports more efficient and reliably because we would have the data in the systems and the controls to ensure that that data is accurate and complete. And with that, I will turn it over to Jacob to provide an overview of our ERP system.
Thank you, Shanae. An ERP is essentially an organization's shared operating platform. Instead of each department working in its own siloed tools, the ERP brings core business functions together in one place. It gives us a consistent process, shared data, and a clearer view of how we operate day to day. It's important to note that an ERP is not meant to solve every problem. It's not meant to replace every specialized need. What it does is provide a common foundation that we can rely on for our essential business functions. As the new director of IT, it's important for me to state that while an ERP relies heavily on IT technology, it is never simply an IT system. Delivering an ERP is always a major undertaking, and this agency, and what I have seen in the last month here, has done an exceptional job working through a truly collaborative effort across all the functional areas. It's been an organizational transformation. It's focused on strengthening accountability, improving consistency, and helping the agency work together in a more unified way. At its core, the purpose of an ERP is to give the agency a reliable framework for how we manage and support our work. So that's what an ERP is. Shanae described why we're presenting it to you. Now I'd like to provide some of the historical context of what the agency has achieved. The ERP planning and implementation has been quite a journey. I understand that Chair Fisher mentioned in the audit committee back in December that the ERP system was initially presented to solve every issue and to address all of the previous audit recommendations. But as we've continued this journey, we've found that the ERP was not going to be the be-all, end-all. So each circle in the picture on this slide represents one of the systems that was used previously, and each of those was anticipated to be incorporated into the ERP. So we started with 15 separate in-house legacy systems, and now we've consolidated those down to 5. Now, these aren't the only systems SANDAG has, but these are the systems that were identified as being part or best suited for consolidation. We've completed major module implementation for finance and accounting and HR, which is a huge accomplishment for the staff and the agency. And as we've been on this journey, we've learned more about the selected ERP system capabilities. And it was identified that the magenta circles in the slide are the systems that require further evaluation to determine the best approach for providing these functions. And that goes back to the first slide of the 4 pillars of what SANDAG does. And so while our ERP system is powerful, there are still other areas where the ERP can be complemented by different technology solutions for functions that SANDAG performs as an agency, such as project management, grants management, resource loading. So you'll see the 4 ones that remaining are a budget management, contract management, HR systems, and project management tools. Those are the ones still being evaluated for better implementation in the future. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kimberly.
Good morning. I'm going to take us back a little further into history and talk about some of the more specifics around the implementation timeline. As previously referenced, it's been a long journey from the 15 separate systems identified to an actively operating ERP system. SANDAG had many years ago determined that the previous financial system needed to be replaced, similar to an old cell phone or your old operating system on your computer. It was no longer able to receive updates or support from the supplier. The ERP journey started with documentation of SANDAG's business requirements and a competitive procurement process, which led to the project kickoff in March of 22. The first phase for financials went live in January of 2024, and the second phase on human resources and payroll went live in July of 25. What we can't see on the slide are the many hurdles encountered throughout the implementation process, things like staff turnover in key project positions, leadership changes. If you stop, you'll notice a lot of new faces around the table that weren't here in 2022. Performance and financial audits continued during the implementation process, and we experienced a compressed timeline for training. Managing overall expectations for large-scale changes to processes and procedures is always a challenge, but was an especially big challenge in this agency. And also happening in the background while this was going on was our move from 401B straight to here at the West Building. The timeline makes this look like a pretty straightforward project, but it does not show the significance of the effort involved. The ERP system touches every corner of the agency and involves complex interdependencies. It changes most administrative processes, so the way we do business had to almost entirely be redesigned. Staff put in massive amounts of time and effort to implement the ERP system while also doing their normal everyday workload. We want to take a moment and we take this opportunity to say kudos to staff and thank them. They are the backbone of the agency. Let me break down the phases of what is in ERP and what we are doing in the system. The implementation was divided into 3 phases: finance, human resources, and other smaller enhancements. Everything in the green and blue boxes are currently complete and active in ERP. The phase 3 purple box is a mix of complete and underway functionality. In the finance area, we are using the system for accounting. Prior to ERP, we were actually functioning in 2 separate accounting softwares. Consolidating the system has streamlined the accounting so that the same controls are applied to expenses, and we have consistent practices across all funds. We are paying our vendors out of ERP. We are tracking our revenues and expenses for financial reporting. We build our budget and control our spending in the ERP system. We bill other agencies to receive the funding sources that make up SANDAG. We centrally store all the documents that support these functions within the ERP system. While the contract management function was returned to CMS, the purchase order and contract terms are still entered into ERP so that we have control around these expenditures. As Shanae mentioned, the new ERP automates budget and contract controls, which is a big improvement from our old system. However, these extra layers initially did add some time to things like payments to our vendors and other accounting entries. This demonstrates why a new system needs to be combined with process improvements and change management to balance these enhanced controls with operational efficiencies. In the blue box, we have phase 2 for human resources and payroll functions. This phase took a little longer to implement because we brought payroll in-house from an outsourced method, and that was a major change. There was also staff turnover in the 2 key positions in HR and payroll that initially started this project. Today, and since July of 25, we are paying our employees out of ERP. We do our timesheets, time tracking within ERP. It maintains our general employee records, employee benefit enrollment and maintenance is within the system, and then the documents that support these functions are stored within the system. So with finance and HR both now in ERP, the information is flowing within one system from we set up the employee, the employee does their time card, they get their paycheck, and then that expense actually becomes a project expenditure on our finance side. So it's all flowing together. The third box is enhanced finance functionality, essentially. So the first couple are complete. Capital Assets went live in October of 24 and assists us in accounting for larger agency assets for financial reporting. We started approving our purchase card expenses within the ERP system in July of 25. Previously, the approval packets were manually routed for approvals. Employee and board reimbursements is half implemented, I would say. We currently pay our employee and board members out of the ERP system the same way we pay other vendors, but ERP has a separate tailored area for these types of payments that expands features such as direct deposit. This function is actually utilized for the first time last month to do our board and committee member payments, and we'll be working on rolling that out to employees next. Vendor access is another section that we've been working on implementing that will improve our vendors' interaction with SANDAG. Currently, invoices are submitted via email or mail, and this vendor access will enable the vendors to actually submit directly into the system. While this is a really nice feature for our vendors, we're still working through the process around that to ensure that vendor invoices are routed to the appropriate staff for review and that it's done in a timely manner. The last one I want to mention is our annual comprehensive financial report builder. So a system that builds our annual financial statements, which is currently done by pulling information out of ERP and manually preparing our financial statements. I hope this provided you with a better understanding of how we are using the ERP system. And now I'll turn it over to Josh to provide some insights on what is done in other software systems.
Thank you, Kim. 2 years into our ERP implementation, we are seeing the benefits of consolidating multiple systems and the connected data. As the team mentioned, we have implemented the major modules, and the system will never be a single solution that solves for every operational and administrative process. We will always rely on specialized platforms external to the ERP to handle niche functions that require specific technical depth and capabilities. For example, we are currently implementing a learning management system, which will enable us to automate the tracking of employee trainings in a more effective and robust way than the ERP system is capable of doing. For inventory, prior to West, we didn't have a system for tracking small assets. We've now tagged those items and are tracking them in a separate system. For capital projects, we are preparing to procure a system to better plan and manage the resources needed for our portfolio of projects. And again, as we advance operational efficiency and effectiveness, we will always use auxiliary software systems for several key areas that fall outside of the ERP's refined scope. We are committed to further exploring ERP capabilities, but our priority remains ensuring that we are always using the right tool for the right job while maintaining the integrity of our data and our workflows. Next slide, please. We want to highlight where we see the biggest opportunities to get even more value out of the system and improve how the organization operates day to day. The system is complex and it cannot be fully understood until all of our teams have started using it, as changes made in one area may have unintended consequences in another. As we come across these challenges, we are collaborating across our teams on solutions. Some examples of these are field limitations, restricting the size of department names that are smaller than some of the names that we've used historically. Working titles or preferred employee names created challenges when automating org charts. For example, directors would show up on the org chart with just the title director, as opposed to the working titles we use every day to help employees and others know who's working on what area of the organization. Adding employee attributes, such as approving purchase card statements, things like that, that allow the system to track who needs training and when. Fixing these issues will allow us to use less manual processes, improve our accuracy, and report more actionable information. We are establishing expertise working through these challenges, and while it isn't easy, we haven't come up against a problem that we haven't been able to solve. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Shanae.
So in summary, we're implementing systems that allow us to conduct our day-to-day work, such as the financial management and human resources systems within the ERP that Kim mentioned. As Josh mentioned, we're also strategically assessing where other specialized platforms help us handle more niche functions, such as grants management and employee training. The ERP implementation is helping us to assess how we do our work. So for SANDAG, it is important to note that the internal operations and administrative functions of any organization are not stagnant. Our needs will continue to evolve over time. With that, we will continue to assess and address recommendations. We'll continuously assess our systems and their capabilities to remain agile and responsive to current and future needs. That assessment includes continuously asking questions such as, what systems do we have? Are they meeting our needs? Are we maximizing what we have? Do we need other systems? And are we able to keep pace with emerging technologies? And lastly, as we continue to move our functions into these systems, we'll need to take a deeper dive into the internal controls of these systems to make sure that the systems are working as intended, to identify mitigations where necessary, and to identify system strengths, gaps, and areas for internal operational efficiencies. And that concludes our presentation, and we're available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shanae and team. And I'd like to just take a moment to welcome you, Jacob. You recently joined us here at SANDAG, and I can tell by your presentation why you were hired. This was excellent work. And thank you all for setting sort of the expectations of what we can get out of ERP and what we can't and how we're working with it. And it sounds like, I know whenever I work with software, you kind of get into the mindset of the software. So it kind of helps you, I think, maybe even streamline your own work practices and procedures. I'm sure we all have a lot of questions, but before we get started, let's just go to public comments and then we can really get going on the questions because there was a lot to unpack here. Michael, can you please call public comments?
Sure, if you're online, please raise your hand now. First, in person, we have Truth, followed by Paul the Bold online.
There was a lot. None of it was what I wanted to hear. I feel like it was a lot of excuses. The false solution ERP by Tyler Technologies was another SANDAG failure. No accountability. And I don't think that it's going to get any better because going back to 2014, Tyler had several people in several states, including California, claim wrongful arrest due to bad data. 2016, complaints cost Washington County, Pennsylvania an extra $1.9 million. 2021, Tyler paid $5.4 million in 2 different federal lawsuits due to unpaid overtime of employees due to bad data. So this board, though well fattened on catering, taxpayer-funded food, No brains, no brains. How much was the 2022 contract, including extensions? What was the timeline for full implementation? What were the metrics for success? And the deadline for an admission that Tyler's system is inadequate. Why isn't that part of this conversation? It's 4 years of failure, not addressed. And then you have stage 1 heroes and stage 5 world class. What does that have to do with the average SANDAG bike lane project costing $10 million? Seriously, here's my suggestion. 1 stage, get it done and get it done right. Quit wasting our time. You have data in silos and data difficult to access. Doesn't SANDAG have an entire data science department of like 40 people or more? What have you guys been doing with our tax dollars? There's just more proof that no decision at SANDAG has ever been data-driven. It has always been political union-driven. So solutions, a public record system first, before any of this other nonsense. Why? Because that is how you find out what's been going on. Every PRA I have done and will do should be publicly available. An individual should be able to easily access every contract SANDAG is a party to with a timeline and live time changes displayed on the SANDAG website. I could do that with every other agency. And all the questions should be answered clearly before a board decides on a multi-million-dollar contract. And whatever doesn't work, back out of it. If you're here just for the stipend or the catering, just leave. Don't ever come back. You need to be part of the solution because the corrupt era is obviously
Thank you. Your
not
time
done.
has expired. Next is Paul the Bold, followed by the original draw. This is item 5.
Paul LeBeau, thank you for attaching the presentation with the initial agenda. I think that slides 4 and 5 are a good picture of where you are at. What disturbs me here is that the next slide says, quote, over time, ... unquote, because the audit recommendations which the slides are based on have a fixed time frame. Not sure what you mean by, quote, able to analyze performance in act of proactivity, quote, unquote, on slide 6. But proactivity, aka dreaming of what could be and making plans accordingly, is what happens a lot around here. Stress on dreaming. Costs money to redo things if the plan doesn't match the reality. The slide 8 diagram is a bit more comforting. It suggests that there is already coordination and I imagine standardization, at least between the financial and human resources departments. Slide 9 shows good progress toward your goals, but on slide 12, it says, quote, ERP interfaces are not intuitive, unquote. They should be clear to everyone who uses it. If something doesn't work and they could fix it, they should not have to keep running to the experts. This and change of work patterns and training should not be seen as areas of opportunity as the slide is labeled. They're part of the package, must-do items. It suggests that you still need a major cultural shift. And perhaps allowing public access to billing contracts.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Next, the original draw, followed by Consuelo. This is item 5.
Yeah, this is so negligent. And I told the audit committee that when they brought this forward, because I don't understand how they don't know all of the fraud, negligence, breach of contracts that Tyler Technologies has engaged in, the 18 federal lawsuits that are currently going on. And the fact that they, there's always significant delays in the project or budget overruns, costing taxpayers way more money. So it's like, how is it that you can just do a quick search online of this entity and find a lot of egregious information as the public, and you guys who are contracting with these people don't even want to acknowledge that that is happening? How much money did you guys spend to implement this, and how many times have you increased this contract, not letting the public know? Because if it's under a certain amount, you don't have to tell people and it doesn't have to come to the board. I mean, the audit committee was saying it was making it harder to write checks. I mean, you guys have to train people how to use this, and you're not able to use it if you don't. And so it's like, this seems like very, I mean, it's very willful, this negligence that's happening, because like, how can this help an audit committee if you can't trust the audit committee to bring forward a contract or a program that is going to be beneficial, and not where it has even investors that are, the top two investors are BlackRock and Vanguard. And again, like I've been telling you guys, if you think that these breaches of data are only going to happen from the outside, those are just the ones that play with you. It's the internal ones that happen. And this entity wants total monopoly over these government contracts. That is very terrifying to think about when this data is going into the hands of some very nefarious people. So, I mean, this just shows further fraud, waste, and abuse that you guys engage in, because it shouldn't be that easy for us to find and for you to fucking ignore.
Our last public comment is Consuelo.
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat, not sure what you mean by able to analyze performance and an act of proactivity on slide 6. But yeah, proactivity, aka dreaming of what you could be and making plans accordingly, is what happens a lot at SANDAG. And as far as working for Congress, it's nothing to brag about, Paloma. It's just a glorified title for limited control and full compliance, especially because you got downgraded to the county and you're still pushing for funding from Congress. We see how great that served us, right? And just how influential you are at getting things accomplished, still begging for funding.
The topic is item 5.
I'm done.
That concludes our public comment on this item, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, member comments and questions. I will start. I have one for Sinead. And that is, what role does the ERP play in tackling all of our corrective actions that you outlined last time?
Yes. So the ERP, there are roughly, I want to say at least 50 recommendations that are ERP systems, documentation related. And so given that those items for implementation are dependent upon the system being up, active, complete with those controls in place. So for example, there are some recommendations regarding systems configurations within the contracts management system. Those overlap with some of the recommendations that are forthcoming regarding HNTB. Those recommendations are coming online. They have similar recommendations. So once we get those items completed from the recommendations from the contracts audit, those should feasibly take care of the recommendations coming from HNTB. Another example is we have recommendations that are advising us to develop a repository for project management deliverables. So as you saw in one of the slides, Josh was mentioning of the supplemental systems that we're looking for. Project management is one of those systems that we're looking to procure. So until we get that procured and we have a sense of what that system can handle, those recommendations are likely going to be placed on hold, or we would have to basically extend the timeline. There are other recommendations related to training and having a learning management module. As Josh noted, our LMS system is now in progress. So as we're kind of building that out and bringing that online, those recommendations, again, are contingent upon that system being implemented. So we kind of wanted to show that the ERP, some of the recommendations are dependent upon those systems, those modules being built and implemented, and not just implemented, but the controls and the policies in place before those recommendations could be considered implemented.
Yeah, Mario.
I think Sinead touches on something very important. And when we've come, let it be at the audit committee or when Sinead presented some of the action items or recommendations through the multiple audits, I think it's starting to look at them with a different lens. It's yes, you could do inaction to try to retire the recommendation, but is that the strategic corporate decision, right? I gave an example that it's just generic. The audit committee, I said, if there was a recommendation that would say you need to do X thing with the existing back office system, and we go and look at it, and it's going to take us a year and a half to implement, we're not going to do it, because we're actually changing the entire back office system to deal with that and many other things, and that's going to be ready in a year. So why go in and do something that it's not even going to be applicable, because we're going to have something different, totally different, that is addressing that and many other issues. So we are starting to take that more strategic lens. It's going to take a while to bring the agency there. That's where the table that Shanae presented about the different stages is the analogy a little bit of what I brought up at the retreat, right? We are going from our teen years to adulthood as an agency. But those are different things that we will be becoming more strategic in a lot of the recommendations and thinking more on the long-term solutions than the immediate solution. Now, if the immediate has to occur because it has to, absolutely, we'll go and implement it. But being that strategic, and that's what Shanae is evaluating and helping us get there with enterprise risk.
Agreed. Any other questions? No other questions? Okay.
I have.
Yeah. Oh, Supervisor, yes.
It's more related to why we decided to name each of the stage what is named, right? So stage 3 is named managed, stage 4 it's named quantitatively managed, but technically in stage 3, which is what we're striving towards, right? We don't fully implement KPIs in those processes yet. And KPIs actually give us qualitative data rather than quantitative. So I don't know, my humble suggestion would be to maybe name stage 3 qualitatively managed, and then quantitatively managed stage 3, qualitatively managed stage 4, just to, maybe be just more clear and transparent on where we truly are in this process. And I just want to give a shout out to everybody who's worked on this. I can tell it's been a ton of work, and I'm very grateful to the staff for putting in the hard hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting comment. Yeah. All right. Okay. Very good. Actually, with no other questions, this was just an information item only. So I will conclude our meeting. The next executive committee meeting is June 5th at 9 a.m.